Hello and welcome to York Craft Society. So as you can see, I am doing suspicious things with a mortar and pestle. So this is a session on making our own watercolour paints that I did last week. So it's kind of a basic recipe, but I mean, if you try it, there's kind of a lot of fiddling around with ratios and everything. So here I'm trying out using some weird kind of already watercolour pigment down at the bottom there, and then adding the gum arabic that's there. It's activated, so it's in water already, and honey. So that's supposed to, it's kind of the ratio you put pigment with gum arabic with honey. That's a basic recipe, and then the mortar and pestle there is there to grind down the pigment and help integrate everything. And the main reason that I did this is because it's me and my friend G1, and we are making our own watercolour paints, and it's this pigment that's already, if you just add water, it's already watercolour, and I was just kind of testing whether it's even possible, because I just bought this thinking it was a pigment, and I can say it is possible. However, I've only used it, as you'll see in the end, by picking up a tiny bit of the solidified pigment and then adding it to a palette. I haven't applied water directly to the palette yet, to the little paint yet, because I'm not sure whether that will work, and I'm still scared. So get this if you want to test it out yourself, but so far it does solidify and it does work. But yeah, it takes quite a lot of like working out ratios. So in fact, when I was making this, I'm mixing some sea green with cobalt blue to make, I kind of want like something that has a real nice gradient, and I think it turned out quite well. But it's really hard to work out the ratios, because like when you've done it, you can't undo it. So I added way too much gum arabic, so it was way too wet, and it was kind of just slooping about inside of there. I did work out that one tasty tip, don't touch this, don't eat this. I mean, it might be tempting, it might smell good, but it's probably not good for you. But basically, you want to add as little as possible, and then add more. I forgot what I was talking about. But my tasty tip obvious is all that, but also that you need a silicone spatula, or otherwise a silicone implement to get it out, because it works so much better, because it can curve. A soft silicone can curve with the bowl or the plate, and it's just so much better at picking up the pigment and the watercolour than anything else, like, quite honestly. Like, I tried it with this little spiky spike. Spoons wouldn't work. Like, when we did it at Craft Society, someone tried a spoon. That didn't work as well. Just like a silicone spatula, best tool for the job. So for the next try, we have an auspicious zoom in so that you can see things better. Even though you can't see things very well, because I did this in my sitting room and the lighting's terrible. But G1 was thinking this pigment is already ground down. I mean, it is fine enough to use in watercolours, but I do think actually it's a bit speckly from what evidence I've seen. So I would recommend grinding it if you want to make the same kind of thing. But she wanted to see, like, that's a makeup pigment that I purchased, and I can't read its name, sorry, I'll add it in there, but it's already ground up, so you could try putting it directly into the pan and then adding the honey and everything and try to integrate it just with a little spiky fork thing, spatula, or with a toothpick. And essentially it worked, because it's such a fine ground pigment already, that if you just add the ingredients, it's going to integrate well. It's not as well mixed as if you're going to use a mortar and pestle, or, you know, the whole glass thing on a plate, but it did work well enough. If you're lazy, you can do this, but it is going to be more expensive to get finely ground pigment, so I would say, and also just less fun. Just less fun. So you'll see me making it and then a little trial of trying it out. One important tip though, because I did have to fix this a little bit at the end. I think it is harder when you're using this method to work out the ratios because it's kind of harder to see, you know, how much you've added, especially with the honey. So I actually I waited 24 hours and it wasn't setting at all, so I actually had to just directly add some more pigment in there, so be careful. And now we skip forward 3 days to look at my experiment. So in the actual Craft Society session, I made one pigment and I just couldn't bear to deal with the excess. So I'm using permanent marking fluid. I was looking for an impermanent marking fluid, but this was the only thing available because there's no art stores, unfortunately. So I'm using this to block out the characters and like colour them in so that when I do background work afterwards, hopefully they'll still be looking good. Now, I don't think I did this perfectly, but I accidentally, I was going to do it using just the pigment that I'd made, so try to just do a one colour challenge, but then I was just like, dem apples need some red, so I actually managed to use the other watercolour, but as I said earlier, I just kind of added a little bit of the watercolour paste and put it into the palette, as you'll see soon. But it took quite a while to draw it actually. That's probably what I spent most of my time doing half my time doing in Craft Society, and it's all in the planning, and I think this is kind of a step forward into what kind of art I want to make. It's not perfect, I think its composition is a bit odd, and you know, there's lots of bits I don't like, but I think it's a step in the right direction. But back to the watercolour. This is made of 2 natural pigments, so the opposite of what we were doing earlier, and it's sienna, raw sienna, and burnt ochre. So it's mostly the lighter yellow one, but it's got a little touch to add some depth. And that's the real fun of making your own paint, that you can add the colours that you want, you can add and make your own colours that are unique. I mean, obviously, like, everything's been done in the world, nothing's unique, blah blah blah, but you know, it's something special, something that you can't buy, but that also does mean that if you like it, you better make a lot of it. So that's why I've got like full pans of this stuff, though admittedly I did actually, in terms of my actual finished little pan of it, I've got a half pan, you can see. Actually, you can't see it, you can just see the red one. I just didn't want to waste my excess, basically. So I've added water to my mortar and pestle, which has the pigment in it. Well, the finished watercolour, essentially. And then I'm just using that to paint, because I didn't want to wash all of that, essentially, paint away. I'm a bit of a miser, realistically. So basically, I've got the red in the writer one, and I've kind of used that to add, so I've kind of got the gradient of apples, you know, kind of where they go a bit more yellow to red, etc, etc. Adds a bit of shading, bit of intrigue, but also to add a little blush to the girl, to her little elbows, her face, make her a little cute, make her a little cute. And I think I ended up giving her a little red dress, so feel free to watch some hopefully relaxing painting. since it ended up becoming a 2-colour challenge sort of thing that I've seen once or twice on YouTube, by that I mean loads of people have probably done it, but I've actually watched one of them, so I'll tell you my experience and struggles with that, especially on the little girl. Like, she's kind of, I mean, obviously when you draw these kind of paintings, you kind of have a focus character or piece, or, you know, there's a focus for the eyes, and she's kind of the only character. Well, the dog's cute. I think the dog was cuter in my drawing there. I think I messed him a bit. But basically, you kind of want to focus, and the focus kind of needs quite to stand out, and for that reason she has a lot of red in her. So I just couldn't get the depth of colour from the brown that I wanted. I wanted it to go from I essentially wanted it to change colour, I think. Wanted it to go from the yellow to the brown, I think. So where it be really light, you know, with a lot of water, and quite just a bit. I wanted it to get a bit deeper than it actually did, I think, is basically what it is. And I couldn't achieve that, so I worked really hard to get a darker shade that I could use for hair. So I did a layer of red, quite a you know, what's it called, like not a carroty blonde, but I guess a carroty brunette, a red brunette, and then just a good layer of brown on top. And I actually am getting into the next layer, so I had to let the permanent masking fluid set. I set for about 3 hours. I didn't need to leave for 3 hours, and then I'm kind of just doing the sky, so the kind of the lightest brown, and kind of the stages of colour. So it's supposed to be a girl and her dog picking. Well, the dog's not picking no apples, but a girl and dog by an apple tree picking some apples. And then there's kind of a field behind her, and then kind of another field in the background, which I was actually quite happy with the technique I used to get the second one, kind of using this flat brush with its darker bristles in the background, which you'll soon see. So it's kind of spiky, just adding a bit of texture, you know. And in the same way that I'm trying to add texture with the kind of moving grass in the foreground. But, you know, I think I would have been happier with a bit more, there you go, that's the technique, with a bit more depth of colour from foreground to background, so I think it blends a bit too much. So more things to work on, more mountains to climb, more fields to walk, I guess. Because that's kind of what art is. It's just seeing. I mean, I do think that artists and generally creative people are quite critical people, but seeing what you like, seeing what you don't like, and then next time when you do something similar, when you can use your knowledge and apply your knowledge, you can make something better, you can improve, you can be critical, but also be happy with what you've done. So I was quite happy. I really like those little apples, actually. Though I didn't want permanent masking fluid. I've never heard of anyone using it. I looked up how to use it on YouTube, so I'm going to link down below to the one I watched, which was quite good, because I wouldn't have thought of adding the pigment to the permanent fluid, because I've only seen the masking fluid being used to keep white, so it's a bit different. It's interesting, but I don't like it has a bit of glisten to it, which I don't really like, so I might experiment in the future in mixing it with some water to kind of thin it down, kind of like varnish. It's an ongoing process, art. It's all about experimentation, seeing what you like, seeing what you don't like, creating. I mean, there's obviously, like, you can go to art school and learn techniques, but I think for me a lot of art is just discovering things. Like, if everyone's going to teach me everything, then there's going to be nothing of my own, nothing that I can be like, it's just fun to explore new things, come up with ideas and concepts, and make mistakes by yourself. I think I'm gonna end that up there. Tell me what you think about about making your own watercolour. I think it's a great idea. I love it. I'm gonna make more. So tell me whether you liked it. Some challenges maybe I can do with my watercolour paints. Things to talk about, etc, etc. Leave a like, etc. Thank you again, guys.